is we're going to cover Harry Nilsson, Schmilsson. So before, I think I'm going to give the first take on this one, and then we'll go to Josh and then Matt. That's the order we
Can I do a quick cleaning of the stacks? Because I was informed that it's not Nilsson, it's Nilsson. So
Nilsson,
it's Harry
Schmilsson,
Nilsson
sorry.
and Nilsson Schmilsson.
Sorry, that might be that might be a little bit of my Jersey accent there too. I go high vowels often when possible, but thank you, Matt. So I'll try to do this. Is that Scandinavian? I feel like Nilsson. Yeah,
I would think so.
Gotcha. Okay,
and John, what song was in the montage?
The song in the montage was "Without You" was in the montage. Okay. So, and Matt, why don't you run the numbers before we start the clock?
Sure. So on Rolling Stone's ratings, this came in at number 281, and at Best Ever Albums, it was 286 in the 1970s. So again, better than Dolly Parton, but still pretty far off for our
Best Ever
purposes.
Albums and Rolling Stone did not see face to face on the 70s. You know, we've done every other decade is going to have much less. There's much less differentiation between what was picked by Best Ever Albums and what was on the Rolling Stone. But the 70s seems to be where the Rolling Stone voters and the Best Ever Albums voters were not simpatico, shall we say.
I mean, I will say that this is the highest rated Harry Nilsson album on Best Ever Albums. So it's got that going for it.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start the clock for Mr. Nilsson. And for our Scandinavian listeners, I apologize for butchering the language. Hope you forgive me.
We've offended so many international listeners at this point.
And we keep adding international listeners too, so I really don't want to do that, but I apologize. We'll just chalk it up to being dumb Americans is what we'll chalk it up to. We can take it. So, okay. So do you remember, Matt? I'll start this way. Do you remember, Matt, when you said one of the best things of doing this podcast was that you occasionally stumble into an album that you weren't have any idea what to expect from it, and then you find that you love an album? That was this album for me. Holy cow, was this album awesome. I also knew like half of the songs on this album without knowing that I knew half the songs on this album. So it basically, it starts with two very clever, very funny songs in their own way, like not laugh out loud funny, but like amusing. You know, one of the songs being about losing your youth kind of, or trying to keep your youth, but in a very kind of pathetic way. It's more just like a funny way. And I could kind of relate to some of the stuff. And then like we had just a bunch of songs where I was like, oh, I know that song. I know that song. Yeah. I am curious, guys, did you recognize Without You? Like, do you know would you recognize that before you heard this one?
Yeah, I was not living under a rock in the 90s. That song was omnipresent. So yeah, I definitely knew that.
Do you remember who sang it?
I did have to take a little bit of time to do that because I was like, who was that? But Josh, did you know right off the bat, or did you?
No, I don't think.
Do you know that song?
Really?
You never heard that song?
Yes, I knew the song.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, it's Mariah Carey. If I finally got that.
I was like, in my head, I was at the end of it. It was crazy because I was double tracking like the Mariah Carey version with his version, and I heard both of them at the same time because they're both in their own way. They stand out quite a bit, but
the chorus is unmistakable. The same song, you know. Like,
Can I also share a funny story about that will earn us our explicit rating this week? I had a friend who thought that the first line of that song was, "No, I can't forget the feeling," and then he thought the word semen was in the first thing. I can't forget the semen on your face as you were leaving, he thought it was. So, and if you listen to it, you'll actually hear how he could hear it, but it's like... Yes. So anyway, that was.
I don't even know if I know any song that has the word semen in it.
Yes.
That's not
I did not. I do not want to take away from that song because it's a really good like it's a melodramatic song, but it's a really good melodramatic song, which I love.
Well, now I'm not gonna think not into that. You know?
So it got to get up driving along and early in the morning are the first three songs. They're excellent, and then Without You comes on. I'm like, ooh, I recognize that song. Then Coconut comes on, which is kind of like a novelty song, but it works. It works in this album, and I don't know how it like if I just heard that song by itself, and for those, you probably know the song without knowing it. It's like, you put the lime in the coconut, but it works in the middle of this album after so many good songs, and then it goes into Let the Good Times Roll, another song that I recognize, and so it's like, wow, and I even recognize Jump Into the Fire afterwards. Same. Yep, and so 4 songs in a row, I'm like, oh, how did I not know Harry Nilsson was the guy who wrote all these songs? And so by the 10th track, I was like, I could listen to like 5 more tracks of this. And so it was a 35-minute album, and it flew by. Second straight album in a row, the lyrics I thought were excellent. It's just a really, really good pop album. That's the best way I can describe it. It's just pop songs. And I mean, we talked about Nilsson before. Do you guys remember? Josh, you may not, but Matt, do you remember how Harry Nilsson came out? I mean, besides obviously being a part of Lennon's like Lost Weekend, I think that's the one thing I did know about him.
That's the only thing that really came to mind. And I knew he was the Beatles were a big fan of his, and they were friends and stuff. But I'm not recalling what else we talked about with him.
You don't remember the Monkeys song that Harry Nilsson wrote?
Oh crap, I don't. It was so long ago.
It was the song "Cuddly Toy," which, if you remember, was
it
about
like,
an orgy.
It was an orgy, yeah.
Yeah, it was about an orgy, and it was a good song too.
That
remember,
is a good song,
it was kind of. And when you think of that song, you can tie it to this, can't you? Because it had that same sort of. Yep. So big thumbs up for me. I dare say that this was either my second or third favorite album we've covered so far in the 70s. That's how much I like this album. So strong thumbs up for me. Josh, what'd you think?
Yeah, I'm going to echo some of the same sentiments you have. I'm glad I'm not the only one that wasn't familiar with him, even though, like you, I knew half of these songs just from them being on the radio or whatever. And I really appreciate his sense of humor, because not only is the title of the album funny, but the cover of him in a bathrobe is also funny. And
looks like Brian Wilson.
Yeah, a little bit. He looked like he just woke up. And I just love how much variety there is in this album. He is playing, I'm assuming he's playing the piano, but then he also just every song is kind of crafted in a different way, and then he adds horns. He's not afraid to, like, I think there's a harmonica in one song, and then you've got the Caribbean sounds of coconut, and then you've got like classic rock songs like Let the Good Times Roll that's been covered a bunch, I think.
Well, there's the Mellotrons on here too, if you noticed. I noticed that a couple different times.
Yeah, so he's like using all of the tools in his, that are possibly available in creating all these interesting, really good pop songs. And I gotta listen to some of his other albums, because I think the next album's called Son of Schmilsson, so that's also funny. and yeah, it's really hard to come across an artist that you know and don't know, and this is like a real discovery. The fact that he's like this great singer-songwriter, he kind of reminds me in a little way of like Ben Folds or like the guy from Eels or something, just a way that he can play the piano and sing. And he's like that singer-songwriter type, but he also has like a sense of humor and like is really clever at crafting different things.
I totally get what you're saying, although he's way, way better.
No, that was just kind of the equivalent.
No, you're right though. Yep.
I agree with you. And also, I knew that "Gotta Get Up" song from the Netflix show Russian Doll. They play it. That's kind of part of the joke of the show. It just repeats over and over again because she keeps coming back to life. Or she can't die. So every day starts over like Groundhog Day, and that's the song that you hear right in the beginning. But yeah, this is also jumping up. This might be on the top 10 at the end of the year, is in contention right now for sure. So great recommend for me. Matt, what did you think?
Yeah, so I've known of Harry Nilsson for many years. My brother definitely brought him up to me. I knew about his connections with the Beatles, and
what are his connections to the Beatles?
Well, they were friends, right?
Oh, okay.
And the Beatles loved, John Lennon in particular was a big fan of Harry Nilsson. And as John mentioned, when John Lennon did his famous, the Lost Weekend, which was like 3 years of like heroin use, whatever. Like Harry Nilsson was with him at part of that at least.
Oh, okay.
He was also really good friends with Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees, like lifelong friends.
So I knew he's kind of this guy that a lot of musicians that we all know, like huge musicians, were really into and really respected, but I didn't really ever could say that I knew any of his songs. So yes, part of this was being surprised, like, oh, I know that song, particularly from like, you know, the was it Down, Without You, Coconut, and Let the Good Times Roll, and Jump Into the Fire. It was like all of them were just like, you know, songs. Maybe not Down. I don't think it started with Without You, but anyway, I was like, I know that song. But I was taken aback. I was expecting for some reason more of like an acoustic singer-songwriter type album. Like that's what I thought I was going to be getting. And it didn't start like that at all. Like right off the bat, Gotta Get Up. And my initial reaction was, first of all, the shock of that. But secondly, this sounds like something from the 90s. This is way ahead of its time. Like, this is 1971. This reminds me of, like, Big Star. I think we're going to talk about Big Star at some point, too. But that's another...
They're ahead of their time, too. Yep.
Early, mid-70s that is just... It sounds like something that came out 20 years later, you know? And so I'm fascinated by stuff like that. So as soon as I heard the beginning track of this, I was like, this is going to be fun. And it was. It was all the things that you guys were saying. I had very similar reactions. You know, a lot of different instrumentation going on. Very bouncy, very catchy, right? It's Beatlesque, right? You could tell why he liked the Beatles and why they liked him. You know, a couple of times he didn't do a ton of harmonies, but the harmonies were in there. Beach Boy-like harmonies that they were doing, you know, and a variety of different genres. Talk again, blues, there's country, there's funk in here, you know, different pop, you know, just really interesting guitar tones that again are ahead of their times. Very crisp production, and you know, a lot of Bo Diddley beats that weren't straight up Bo Diddley beats, but still had the da 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 ba da ba. And it's just great. When I got to Without You, as soon as the piano started playing, I was like, this sounds something like from the late 80s, early 90s, like cheesy ballad kind of thing, like, you know. And then it kicked into the Mariah, like I'm picturing Mariah Carey, you know, she's
on that stage
singing that,
in the black dress,
And I just started laughing. I was like, holy crap, he sang this song? Like, you got to be kidding me. So Coconut is a song certainly that I've known for a while, and I listening to it this time around, I like how it builds at the end. I don't know if I ever really listened to it. It always seemed like it was in the background at some, I don't know, wedding or something, or on a TV show or whatever, but I never really listened to it. And I love the way that built. And Jump Into the Fire, I was like, I know this song. And it took me a couple of minutes, but I finally remembered there was a band. I had the Craft soundtrack from that movie, Josh. I don't know if you're still could do that. Josh's film, The Craft. Not that great of a film, but the soundtrack I really liked. It had a lot of '90s artists and stuff, and the band Tripping Daisy did a cover of that, which might be the only Tripping Daisy song that I know. But really like that. And I think actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think Harry Nilsson has a song on the Forrest Gump soundtrack. I think he did Everybody's Talking. Nobody understands a word I'm saying.
Yeah. That's on Midnight Cowboy, also a famous song.
And that also was the other thing that my brother told me. He's like, he before this, he's like, if you get a chance before the podcast, watch. There's a documentary on Netflix. It's called "Who Is Harry Nilsson and Why Is Everybody Talking About Him?" And so I didn't watch it because that's kind of breaking the rules. But he said it's very, very good, and recommended that we all watch it.
Add that to the Letterboxd list.
Yeah, but this, I agree with you guys. I was thinking this might be in my top 10 of the deck. Like, this is totally up my alley.
Yeah.
Very melodic, very catchy. Interesting. You know, even the last track, I think, I'll Never Leave You, was maybe the one song that didn't jump out at me right away. But as I'm listening to it, I just can recognize there's a lot of stuff going on here. And this is a song that I feel like I would like the more and more I listen to it. And even though a lot of the stuff jumped out at me as being very catchy and very likable, I think this is an album that would still continue to grow on me because it's so well produced. It's so intricate. It's so interesting. And again, I can't rave enough about how ahead of its time. Even though you got the Mellotron in here, which I did pick up on, it's not overly done. There's nothing that's like over the top 60s or 70s on here. This is like a 90s record to me. And maybe even beyond that. Maybe it's just like a timeless record, potentially. So
yeah, I don't even know if I think of it as a 90s album. I just think of it kind of, it doesn't scream 1971.
No.
Like the other albums that we've covered in 1971 for the most part too.
Yeah, well, I was hearing like kind of bands like I had this similar reaction when we listened to it was kind of like Zombies-esque, because the Zombies had very similar kind of things going on, a little bit more 60s sounding, but it just reminded me of bands like Jellyfish, from the 90s that did stuff like Ben Folds is another good example of that kind of bouncy piano part.
Also,
that is
yeah. I was going to say something that popped into my head while you were talking was like Fountains of Wayne. They're like a modern equivalent of somebody who crafts really good songs, for other people sometimes, and also has that kind of like pop sensibility. That was his whole his MO basically was creating pop songs.
And I think
Go ahead,
that big star reference, Matt, was a really good one. Was a good one. We're going to cover them multiple times, and actually cool listen hot take because Rolling Stone likes them much more than Best Ever Albums does.
Yeah,
so.
I think they're just at the cusp of 100 on Best Ever Albums, but that's another band that when the first time and I know them more than Nilsson, but the first time you hear them, you're like, this is the 70s? Like, you got to be kidding! No freaking way, So I'm interested in why I do want to see that documentary. I think Nilsson did die young. I think he did.
He did, yeah.
Okay, like a substance abuse.
Yeah.
Was it like drugs or alcohol or something?
I think he had
Go ahead, John. Sorry.
I think it's like the Jerry Garcia death where he just kind of blew up heavy, you know what I mean? Had health issues. I think he even got diabetes and kind of like Garcia did, right? And just I think slowly kind of faded, Yeah.
Yeah, he I can imagine he's an artist that's very influential to other people as well.
Yes.
Just
an artist, Josh.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Can I also say, Matt, I when you said Tripping Daisy, I was like, there's definitely a song I know from Tripping Daisy, but I couldn't remember it. It is the song, remember the song, Matt? I Got a Girl?
I got a girl, she lives with me.
You got it. There you go. That's the song from Tripping Daisy. So I knew there was one I remember.
Okay.
So,
yep.
So that's
this is
their big hit.
Craft sound. I think the soundtrack of The Craft is better than the movie, though.
So now you can say you know two Tripping Daisy songs. So.
Maybe that's an essential question idea in the future.
Tripping Daisy songs?
No,
best soundtracks. Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, but, file it away. Maybe we'll do it next time. So, all right, I think that puts a bow on that segment. Nilsson Schmilsson. I got it right that time, right, Matt?
You got
Another 2 straight albums. Thumbs up all the way around. Enthusiastic thumbs up.